Welcome back to Another Thing. Let's continue our conversation about the Trump effect. We talked about Atlantic City. Let's talk about politics and the future of politics. Dr. Ben Dworkin is director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate
it. So the Trump effect. We've never seen anything like this before, right?
Never.
That's safe to say.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the present and then the future. What is his effect on present day politics? It seems like nobody quite is able to figure him out.
Well, I think that's true, but because he breaks all these rules. You know, somewhere along the line, people like me, political scientists, look at past performance, past elections, and we say, well, these are how you win for presidency. Somewhere on page 1, it says you're not supposed to be able to insult your party's leading prisoner of war and public servant like John McCain for being a prisoner of war. You're not supposed to get away with calling him a loser and get the nomination. And yet, Trump did. So rules.
And there's a whole list of them.
There's a whole bunch of those, but that's sort of that came in the beginning, and these kinds of rule breaking, we used to think this was how you performed and this is how you behaved and this is what would happen when you ran for president. Trump has thrown all those out, and that's really the storyline of this year.
And he's like Jason. Every time you think he's dead, he comes back.
Absolutely.
And how does he do it? That's what I don't get.
So one of the three things that I think Trump has, in ways that Trump is affecting American politics, is the constituency. There was always an anti-establishment constituency, largely in the Republican Party, but not exclusively. But it was out there. And these are people who voted for Ron Paul, not Rand, his son who ran
Ross Perot before that.
Yeah, people who were really looking for the anti-establishment, the outsider to do it. But when you had a marginal candidate like Ron Paul, you had about 10% of the vote and no one really cared. Suddenly you had someone who was able to get themselves covered like Donald Trump, and it became 30% of the vote. That constituency is now out there. And there are going to be people in the future, if Trump doesn't win, people like Chris Christie of New Jersey who are going to be trying to inherit that Trump constituency when they run again for president.
But to remold it and to make it more palatable if he loses.
They're going to have to find a way to expand it. You're not going to be able to win with 30% of the vote, but you need to be, it's a tremendous base, and I don't think anybody really understood how much was out there.
You know, it's funny, I brought up Ross Perot, and as I'm thinking about it, there are some comparisons. I mean, a guy that can't be bought, that's outside the system, that ran a strong business, that speaks like us, that isn't afraid, isn't politically correct. And then as people got to know him, and the media went after him, he started to diminish. The difference between him and Donald Trump, again, is this Jason effect.
Well, in part there, I mean, look, we have to remember Perot was in, then he was out in August, and then he got back in again. It was a whole particular dynamic back in '92 when he ran. One of the things, the biggest difference between...
And he was an independent.
Right, and it's also true. He didn't have the party line. What is perhaps most different in terms of them as politicians between Perot and Trump is that Trump is tremendously adept at using communications, and Perot was not.
And social media.
And particularly social media. And that's really the second area in which he has affected things. We've seen social media used to get information out. We had websites. Now you could find out where your candidate stood. And we had fundraising, which seemed that tremendous. What Trump has done is use social media to set the agenda. Look, you've been you're an experienced reporter, so you understand there used to be a time when whatever was on page 1 above the fold in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, those were the dominant stories of the day, what people were talking about. What Donald Trump tweets, and this is the Twitter election, what he tweets out at 2 o'clock in the morning is what everybody is talking about the next morning. That has reshaped how we use and how we understand the political discussion.
And he can steal the headlines. He can absolutely steal the headlines.
He sets the headlines. That's the thing.
And he gets up and he tweets, and then he'll call into Fox and Friends, or he'll call into the Today Show, right, and they'll drop whatever they have to put Donald Trump on just at the off chance he's going to say something outlandish.
Absolutely. And that's really the third thing in terms of how he has shaped our politics. He has set the conversation. Things that were unsaid, things that were taboo, things that you didn't quite go there. He now does. These fights, whether it was with the Kahns and the Gold Star family we saw right after the convention, or any of the other
Fox News and Megyn
or
Kelly.
Fox News and Megyn Kelly. I mean, there's a whole list of them. But the point is that there were certain points in which we used to think this was unpresidential, and a candidate like Trump has reset the stage in terms of the conversation. How do we shape things? What things we talk about? Excuse me. What things we can now talk about in a different way.
Let's talk about the effect right now on current candidates.
Sure.
Do you see people embracing the Trump mantra, or are they running from it?
A little bit of both, and particularly in the Republican Party, because he is now the party's standard bearer. There are folks who are out there in congressional districts who are absolutely embracing the Trump agenda. It works for him. Why shouldn't it work for me? They're talking about walls. They're talking about banning Muslim immigrants from coming into the country, any number of different things. So that there is
All
an
things
agenda.
that started with him.
Things that he created, and if he didn't create, he certainly brought out into the mainstream, and that's really how he shaped the conversation. But at the same time, there are people, Senator Kirk out in Illinois, people who are running away from the Trump agenda. They're concerned that it goes beyond what they understood the Republican Party to stand for, and so they're trying to distance themselves in different ways. Whether they will be able to create that distance and help their own electoral chances is really something we're going to have to wait to see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Dr. Ben Dworkin, director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University. When we come back.
Welcome to the world's first ever penitentiary, Eastern State in Philadelphia.